Today, we speak of a holy grail.
Our entire space race of the 1960s was in response to an event.
Today's gonna conclude my 3-day marathon of reviewing the original Transformers trilogy.
If you breathe a word of what you've seen here, it will do time for treason.
Which means we're ending Transformers Dark of the Moon. Now, this is such an interesting thing to talk about because addressing the first Transformers movie that came out in 2007, I think most people generally agree that it's a fun action movie, that it's just a good slap them up, have some fun, sit down in a movie theater, and just watch big robots beat each other up. If nothing else, I do think the storyline was serviceable, but even then, most people agree that it's a fun movie. So that brings us to the third movie. If I had to tell somebody my thoughts on it in one phrase, one sentence, I would say it is easily in my top 5 favorite movies of all time. So to say that this is one of my top 5 of all time really says something. Now, some of that could be nostalgia speaking, but even going back, getting older, being into film, I still think it is a fantastic blockbuster, fun action, big budget movie. I will address some of the very few cons that exist in this movie, but I do want to start by saying I don't know how in the world this movie got as low as a 37% Rotten Tomato score, because this movie is fan-freaking-tastic. It is so much fun. To start off with a lot of those pros, for one thing, as I've said in the previous 2 reviews, the CGI here is nothing short of spectacular. It only somehow gets better in this movie, but we all knew that. It's Transformers. That's what you come to see them for. So let's talk a little bit more about what maybe you didn't expect from this movie. It definitely redeemed a lot of the faults given from Revenge of the Fallen in the second movie, and that being that they really dialed back on a lot of the inappropriate content that just scattered throughout the second one. Not to say that it's completely kid-appropriate. It's certainly still not. There's still innuendos, there's still jokes, and there's still a pretty serviceable amount of language in it. With that being said, they really dialed back on the sexual humor, the weird interactions, the dogs humping dogs, the robot genitalia. They really dialed back, and by dialed back I mean completely got rid of that. It really brought back what the first movie was so great about, just times 10. And I really mean that even in terms of story, not just in terms of action. The story was, in my opinion, the best out of all 6 Transformers movies in this one. It was very believable. To me, it made a lot of sense. And it really originates into the original moon landing, which is so fun to see Michael Bay kind of explore that and see how Transformers were involved with that, because I love it when history gets involved with what I love, not in a cheesy way, not in a stupid way, but to understand, it makes sense that Transformers were around during the moon landing. The Ark was involved. Sentinel Prime was involved. Sam Witwicky is back as the main lead character. This time he's looking to get a job, and I think he's as good of a character as ever. He's made better in this movie by the fact that he's not constantly bombarded with a bunch of weird side characters like transforming hot chicks, and it's also kind of fun seeing Megatron be stomped on here, right? Because as Sentinel Prime turns to the Decepticon sides and they work together, you see the sense of Sentinel not being willing to work under Megatron, but work with him. And Megatron doesn't like that, obviously, because he's Megatron. On a side note, I also think it's worth mentioning that Megatron has probably the best design out of the original trilogy. That makes the least sense, but looks the coolest to me. Being a Mack truck, I think it is, like a beat up Mack truck in this movie, it served to be the coolest design in my opinion, but definitely made the least sense. Like, Megatron would not take the form of a little beat up truck. He would definitely be a Cybertronian jet or Cybertronian tank that flies. They introduced a lot of really classic characters in this movie too. Ones that to this day are some of my all-time favorite, like the Wreckers. I love the Wreckers. I think they're so cool. I think the drill bot in this movie, which is the massive part of the climax, who is controlled by Shockwave, who is so freaking cool looking. So here's what sets this movie apart, right? Because the previous 2 movies I think are fun, they're great, but here's why this one is in my top 5 favorite movies of all time. Every movie, for the most part, especially big budget movies, you know how they're gonna end. You know who's gonna win, you know how it's gonna end, you know what's gonna turn out for the most part. The question is how, and how they're gonna answer that question in the movie. In Avengers Infinity War, we all know that the Avengers are going to end up beating Thanos. That's not a question. It's a Marvel movie. We know that. But what made that movie so wonderful is not knowing how. How are they going to come back? How are they going to bring back the other people? How are they going to win against Thanos, somebody so powerful with these 5 stones? And not knowing that is really what's fun about these movies. And to me, Transformers Dark of the Moon did a very decent job of trying to get us to answer the question of how. We know the Autobots are going to win. It's happened in the last two movies. We know it's going to happen here. But at one point in the movie, the military sends the Autobots off in a shuttle into another world saying, hey, if you leave, the Decepticons will. Big news flash, it didn't work. And now the Decepticons full on take over the city. And it gets pretty dark. It's pretty sad. You're like, wow, there's no hope. No, they're going to come back. You know they're going to win. You just don't know how, because the hope has fallen so deeply. Everything that's presented is absolutely wonderful. And the comeback and the big how is super exciting to me. Now, if we are talking about some objective cons about the movie, it is a little overlong. It's a little prolonged. It didn't need to be as long as it was. Being around 2 hours and 35 minutes, I think it could have been chopped down to about 2 hours and 10 minutes if we had taken out some of the humans falling from the building, from the driller bot, yada yada stuff. But again, I love those scenes. They're really cool to watch. Other than that, I'll be honest, I don't have a lot to fault about this movie. Now, the final thing that I want to address about this movie that nobody ever talks about, okay, is a lot of people call this movie very run-of-the-mill, very predictable, step-by-step. And the funny thing is, you say that from 2021, but the same way that people love and adore Wizard of Oz and claim that it's not predictable, well, it is by today's standards, but it wasn't from back in the day. That's the way you need to look at this movie. Now, this came out in 2011. Funny enough, it came out like several months before the first Avengers movies dropped, okay? And people will go back and make fun of it for using the stereotypical beam in the sky trope, if you know what I'm talking about. But here's what nobody realizes. Transformers Dark of the Moon, Michael Bay, the team of that Transformers, were the ones who created the sky beam. They're the one who invented that concept. Before then, nobody had done that before. Now, don't pull some obscure thing out of the sky like Independence Day because the beam came from the ship. I'm talking about a sky beam shooting up the sky, trying to do something from space. But see, everybody credits the first Avengers for that when they came out with their movie a year after this, and that's some bullcrap. Now, I love the original Avengers movies, but that movie straight up copied most of what's in Transformers Dark of the Moon. Seriously, have you seen the ships that ride around trying to attack people? The big motherships that look like big beetles? This movie came out before the first Avengers, and everyone loved Avengers, but nobody wanted to call out the fact that it really seemed to intentionally copy everything off the back of Transformers Dark of the Moon, just because it's a Michael Bay movie, and, you know, he could never do anything right? But if you ever watch that movie and think, oh, another Skybeam, no. The original Skybeam. They created the concept. Everyone after copied that concept. That does, however, conclude my thought, not just on this Transformers movie, but the original trilogy. If you want to see my thoughts on the first two movies from the Transformers series, make sure to look at the last 2 days. I'll have it in the description so that you can watch those. At the end of the day, slapping this between a rating of 1 to 10, I'm absolutely going to give this movie a 9 out of 10. The reason I didn't give it a straight 10 is simply because it's a little too long for its own good. But as a Transformers nerd, that's just more time for me to look at Transformers, and I'm okay with that. Thank you guys so much for tuning in to watch over the last few days of reviewing these movies. And if you want to check out my other videos, you're always free to do that, because we're still making a video every single day until we reach 1,000 subscribers, which is, oh guys, it's a huge undertaking. It's been exhausting, but I've loved every second of it. If you're watching and you're not subscribed, please do subscribe. I think 60 to 70% of my viewers are not subscribed to the channel. And if you're watching, it really shows your support, and I really do appreciate it. So make sure to do that and hit the bell button so you're notified when I come out with a new video every single day. I'll see you guys tomorrow. Later, guys.